So today we're going to talk about navigating Pride in honor of Pride Month and us being LGBTQIA plus individuals. But we're going to be talking about Pride beyond Pride Month. Like, what does it mean to have a healthy relationship with Pride? And how do we navigate the concept of Pride when our society has been so anti us loving anything about ourselves, taking ownership in it.
I mean, that's gonna cause capitalist society in like the makeup and plastic surgery industry of like, this is how your body's supposed to look like sort of thing. And that causes people to, I mean, it's one thing if you purchase that for your own self-expression, but it's another thing that, you know, everyone has been pressured by the capitalist society of hating yourself, and you must purchase these products in order to be loved by the world or tolerated by the world.
So you're speaking to like taking genuine pride in our appearance and like who we are and how we want to look versus what the world thinks we should look like.
Yeah, because you are speaking to what were the words that you just used?
So I was saying, you know, navigating our healthy relationship with pride in a society that's literally shamed the concept of pride as like arrogance, as being full of yourself, as, you know, liking yourself too much. Like, what does it mean to like yourself too much or to love yourself too much versus
Is there
a
ever
healthy relationship with pride?
So I guess maybe because I haven't necessarily been in that space before, what is it to be to love yourself too much?
Yeah, and that's where I think we need to differentiate, like, again, healthy pride and self-love versus arrogance, because arrogance usually comes from actually insecurity, right? Putting on a face of being something that we're not, because we feel like an imposter or we feel not good enough. It's usually coming from a not good enough, you know, and of course there's narcissism and things like that. And I've worked with so many people that literally tell me, I don't want to take pride in my accomplishments. I don't want to take pride in my identity. I don't want to be happy with what I've done because that will mean that I'm full of myself. That will mean I'm arrogant. That will mean I'm narcissistic. So the concept of pride, and even like pride is one of the 7 deadly sins, right? So that also has applied a cultural stigma against the concept of taking pride in our work, owning our personalities, and actually loving ourselves. So I think this is a good question of what is the difference between actually loving yourself, because is there such a thing as loving yourself too much, versus, you know, moving into that sort of arrogant, I'm the center of the entire world territory.
Yeah, and I mean, you just hosted and led a pride and pleasure ritual, and the words pride and pleasure are both things that we've been taught as a society that, you know, are deadly sins.
Right.
Like if we take too much pleasure in something, then you're gluttonous, or too much pride is another deadly sin. So it's just one of those things where we don't want to be anywhere near that, and it's just cultivates us feeling more secure in being overly critical and hating ourselves, because that would mean that we are unselfish and we're just going to martyr ourselves by attempting to pour from an empty cup, so to speak.
Right.
Because God forbid we do self-care for ourselves. The whole, like, put on your oxygen mask before you put it on someone else is just such a... They have to tell you that every time when you go on an airplane, because people would not do that.
Right.
That's not how our brains work. We're like, I need to sacrifice myself. And it's like, if you are not able to breathe, you will fail to put them, help people put their oxygen masks on.
Right. Yeah. And so being able to be proud of our accomplishments, of our interests, of our identity and personality, I think is important. And like, I'm thinking of a meme. There was a little comic meme, and I'm sure we can find it to post, but it was basically like, you know, those damn LGBTQ people being gay their entire identity. Mm-hmm. And then you see like a picture of like the back of their car that's like covered in political, you know, stickers and stuff. Like, you know what? If that's what you like to own, go for it. If that's what you take pride in, whatever you identify in, as long as you're not deliberately harming other people, like, okay. But it's like there's only certain things that we're allowed to be proud about. Mm-hmm. And oh my gosh, we could obviously go down the whole, why isn't there straight pride? And, you know, why isn't there white pride? And things like that. But, like, acknowledging pride as an individual and normalizing being able to take that pride in who we are and pleasure in who we are, I think is something we're missing.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing though, is that, you know, you hear songs of like proud country boy or proud to be an American or, you know, pride over these dominant culture concepts. Like that's, you know, proud to be a Christian, all of these different things that are just easy to say because there's no discrimination necessarily against that.
Yeah. So, and if you want to be proud to be an American,
go for it. Exactly.
I don't have to be.
Right. So, but I was thinking about why is Pride such a big deal for, you know, this month LGBTQIA community, and I'm like, I need to find a way to plug this into this podcast because it's just such an incredible song.
I knew it. I knew coming in today that this was going to be a thing that came up.
Well, yeah, because it's crucial. And so Maddie Zame, I'm really bad at pronouncing.
Spell it.
Zahm. Zom.
I'd say Zom.
Okay. Yeah, so she just released a beautiful song. It's heartbreaking, basically talking about loving her, like her younger self would be so shocked and upset over the things that she'd done when she's older because that wasn't the values that her younger self had. But her younger self also didn't know how to be real. Like her younger self was just trying to fit in.
Yeah.
And so it's like pride for communities that don't have a space to be proud usually, or have been shamed for attempting to just discover their identity, not even proclaim it loud and proud and be super open about it, just figuring it out.
Right. Safe spaces are important to gather with people that we feel akin to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're not. I doubt that there have been many people who have felt the shame for their dominant culture society, as much as people who are in minorities for being who they are.
Right, because currently, when I think about pride, like just the concept of pride, there's certainly things that dominant society or dominant culture have said it's okay to be proud about and things that it's not. And where that ultimately stems from is that separation, right? Like, well, if you're proud of that, that means I can't be proud of this, which is totally false.
Yeah.
And I see white people get up in arms all the time about, you know, when there's African American Heritage Month or Black History Month and things like that. And they're like, well, why isn't there a White History Month?
Because that is history.
Because this is the dominant history. But if you want to celebrate some aspect of your history, by all means, go for it. Like, there are totally groups for that. You don't have to shame another group for having...
There's St. Patrick's Day. Be happy for being Irish. Thank you.
Right. And I mean, there are people that do, you know, reenactment of war, which I personally don't know why you would be proud of war. But you can be proud that your family defended your country or whatever. And that does not have to... Like, I don't have to shame that and tell you not to do it or make a big deal or anything in order to be proud of the things that I am proud of. And it's like that whole like idea that there's only so many slices of the pride pie that can go around, which totally is false.
Right. And I also think that people believe that pride events, well, I went to a pride event last weekend in DC, and right on DuPont Circle, there were these really loud protesters that were screaming about pride being the devil and that we need to be saved. And it's like, our pride event was not here to send a message to straights being like, hello, convert or else, you know, and it's almost like that. It's just a space for us to celebrate ourselves. And it's not a space for, you know, there's been a lot of sad news reports of white supremacists and Proud Boys. There was a drag queen that was doing like story time in a library, and Proud Boys came in and harassed her to the point where her and her boyfriend had to like take her into a back room, like the librarians, and have her change into more masculine clothes and take off makeup so they could escape without any sort of detrimental thing happening. But it's like that, like, people chose to be there. Like, if you didn't want your kid to go to a drag queen book reading at a library, you don't have to take them there. But you showing up with tactical gear to a library is going to cause more fear.
Well, that's a threat. So this is where pride and threat need to be uncoupled. Because, again, if I'm proud of being LGBTQIA, or I'm proud to, you know, sometimes I take pride in being an AFAB person because I take pride in the fact that I've survived and, you know, experienced what I've experienced and been able to work through it healthily. Like, and I don't know, some people might have opinions about having pride in that, but like, I don't have to attack or make threats on other people to take pride in what I've been through and my identity. Again, like, there's like, and it's interesting, Proud Boys, like, it's a threat. It's a superiority thing. And so if quote unquote pride is coming out of I am superior to you, that's not healthy pride. And that's why, you know, the topic, I wanted to call it navigating pride, because we want to learn how to healthily navigate what healthy pride actually looks like. Making threats, acting like you're superior, acting like you are somehow better than others because you are white or black or Latino or Asian or male or female or anything, like, that's not pride. That's comparison, and that's reductionist, and like, all kinds of things.
And there's also subsects of how we treat people in pride events, in terms of pride is supposed to be a safe space, and if there are and it's supposed to be a safe space with no judgment, essentially. And there are a lot of ambiguous looking people out there that you have no idea what their sexuality, gender, expression, identity, whatever would be. And there are also people who can be, quote unquote, flagged for looking like a heterosexual couple.
Right.
But they can both be cisgender, asexual, people, that are
Well, I
in a
mean, I've
couple.
known people in the LGBTQIA community that say ace people don't deserve a place
Right.
in the umbrella. Like this, again, this whole idea of division. And obviously, LGBTQIA is saying,
But sexuality in general is such a dominant
right.
concept. So it's another space for people to be like, okay, I don't have that desire for being sexual, like dominant culture claims sexuality needs to be. And there's less representation of them.
Right.
Like I planned on one of the weeks of the month to spread asexual awareness, and there's very few quote unquote out asexual like characters, or they don't really use the term asexuality around too much. There's not really many asexual songs out there, like
Right.
So the fact that it's just another minority within a minority,
Right.
but you can have pride in that and exist in LGBTQ pride spaces, or I hope, like
Yeah, again, if our quote unquote pride in ourselves is trying to diminish someone else's, how is that healthy pride? That is external, comparative, focused stuff. Don't even get me started on bi erasure either.
Oh, right. Well, that's what I was saying too, is like it could just be two cis people who are bi, a bi man and a bi woman together, but they're both bi, so
Right.
they both belong in pride too. And it's just the amount of discrimination that people have to experience, and if you are, like, I know that the history of pride, pride started with a riot, that's usually the phrase. And a lot of people leading the movement, I believe, were Black trans women.
Yes.
But then it was like the concept of the gay man was just such like a terrifying concept that it once HIV and like gay like homosexuality was becoming a little bit more open,
Visible. Maybe.
yeah, the white chiseled gay man kind of became like the prime, like this is what LGBTQI pride means ultimately. Bit attractive white bodies.
Well, I won't call out like specific organizations, but when we witness LGBTQI organizations, I've noted that a lot of them tend to be, all the board members have leaned heavily towards being gay white men.
Yeah.
So it's like we need diversity in pride. And that means not just LGBTQIA pride, but being able to be proud in our heritage and our ancestry and, maybe the town that we were raised in, or even our country of origin, if we feel genuinely proud of that.
And it's kind of like, I'm going to make an interesting analogy. Heck.
I'm ready for this.
So I was thinking about this the other day in terms of, sometimes I'll have a hyperfixation and I'll really want to share it with you. And let's say you're like, I don't feel comfortable, or I'm not interested in it, or I really don't want, like, there was a TV show that I was like, oh, come on, just like one episode. Like, I really want to share this with you. And you're like, no, like, don't push me into watching this. And I was like, oh, right. Like, sorry. But it's like pride doesn't mean evangelical. And pride can be like your hyperfixated passion on aspects of yourself that you love.
Absolutely.
And are dedicated to learning more about. So there are people that do like the 23andMe and like trace all of their family roots and have like genealogy, family tree, like posted in their house. Like it's awesome. That's
you do you, boo.
That's really cool. I learned more about my neurodivergence and became super hyperfixated on what that meant, and kind of helping people build more awareness. I'm not necessarily being evangelical towards it necessarily, but I am posting about it more often. But I'm not being like shoving it onto people.
Right. You're not like, this is the only correct way to be. You're like, this is my way of being. Mm-hmm. And I'm celebrating that.
And it's not doing harm. That's the biggest thing. Like, when we see someone having pride in doing harm, that's when we can... And this is the whole, like, interesting morality of it all, of, like, how do we define harm? Because we can go into really interesting depths of what different religions and different people describe as harm. And then they get evangelical about saying, you are not allowed to do this. We are going to make laws and whatnot of, like, what harm is. And that can be really hard because
some people claim that they're being harmed by the existence of people, which...
Yes, but also people, like, I believe it's Texas, or I think it's Texas, that there are different laws put out as being voted on that discuss the fact that parents who are accepting of their trans kids' identities are groomers.
Wow.
Essentially. And if anyone catches wind that a parent is, accepting of their kid's trans identity or anything, they can be reported and sent to jail. Wow. I don't know if any of those have passed yet,
I sincerely hope not.
But I've heard that those are some of the laws in existence, or the ones that could be in existence soon. But it's like, so that's what people define as harm. They're like, we're saving these kids from this grooming situation, and they're evangelical about that.
Yeah. Yikes. And that's only one right way of thinking being. Wow, that was a collection of words. But
yeah.
When we are convinced that there's only one right side, we're probably doing harm. If we think there's only one right way to be, like, obviously there are certain ways that it is never right to be. Doing physical harm or making threats to other people is never okay. Doing things to people's bodies, minds, psyches, spirits, etc. without their consent is harm. Like, doing things to people without consent is harm. You don't have to go to a pride parade. You don't have to watch a show with a gay person in it. You don't have to participate in, a group that you're not interested in. But actively saying that group all needs to die or needs to change or needs to repent or whatever, that's, to me, doing harm.
Yeah, and if you are uncomfortable or disgusted by it or whatever, but yet you're still going to those places and submerging yourself into the culture to protest it.
To be angry.
To be angry about it is not healthy for you.
Right.
Like, you're just going to get more activated.
It's not taking your rights away for someone else to be a member of a group that you aren't.
Right. And
that's where, this whole concept of just pride in general is really interesting to me, because it's like I try to be so careful in my wording because I never want to make it sound like, I support points of view that genuinely do harm.
Well, right. That was why I was going down the rabbit hole of like, oh, evangelical. You don't want to be evangelical, but also you still want to stand up and advocate for if there are people that are doing harm, but then what does harm mean in the morality of everyone else? Because people who have protested things that I don't agree with or do agree with have claimed harm as like the reason why they're protesting it, even though I don't see it that way. So it's a really fascinating human nature conundrum.
Right. So it is hard to navigate these things. It's really hard to be delicate. And I think that it's in our best interests if we feel like we're othering someone else, if we feel like we're energetically getting tied up in someone else's identity and that determining something about our future if they're really genuinely not attacking us. Like, why are we spending our time defending our identity if their identity isn't and doesn't have to intersect with ours. I.e., evangelical churchgoers. Like, go evangelize all you want in your church group, right? And with the people that are interested and with the people that show up and want to be a part of that. But you don't need to take that into an LGBTQ pride event and tell them that they're wrong and they're all going to hell, because that does emotional harm. And this is where it's like, I don't believe in attacking any group.
Right.
Any group. I believe in supporting all groups who choose to do no harm.
Right.
So, like, obviously, I like to go to my neo-Nazis. They are doing harm.
Right.
Right. Their worldview, if all they ever did was sit privately in their house and stew in their misery about the fact that, you know, black people exist and gay people exist and whatever exist, all right, you do you, boo. But it's the fact that they go out and they do harm and they make threats and they have weapons and they do scary ass shit and they commit crimes. I'm not going to support that. I'm not going to condone that. But I am not going to attack the entire group of every person that ever has believed something of that nature.
Right.
Because we know that belief comes from trauma.
Right.
So
I also, man, my brain always goes into this, like, picking apart the nuance of everything. So I was thinking about how Pride is an organized event where people are not trying to do harm. They're just celebrating. But I also started this episode by saying Pride started with a riot.
yes.
So it's like, okay, like, riots were causing, like, harm to, like, I don't know, wasn't it like a brick was thrown through
a window? And that, all of that original Pride, there's some really, really good books on this, and I am not a history buff and I don't remember names, and I apologize for that, but that was, like, mostly police on LGBTQ instigated.
Right.
Like, you know, and that was defense at that point. It's like backing a scared, wounded animal into a corner and expecting it not to lunge out and bite you kind of thing.
Right. Expecting the freeze response when it won't fight response.
Exactly. And so trauma, right? Trauma responses. And that's why even with our, you know, super violent groups, I acknowledge that there's trauma at play there. It does not excuse the behavior.
Right.
But unfortunately, as a species, we've had to move into violence in order to make changes, which is really fucked up. And, like, going back in time and looking at that nuance, yes, Pride started with a riot, but it's not that anymore. And it doesn't need to be that anymore if we can be a culture that just lets each other be. Right? And lets us own our experiences and be authentic and not be in the there is only one right way of being and only one right way of thinking mindset. You know, it's this, I talk about it, I feel like at least once an episode, the whole illusion of separation. Right? Like, if I'm white and you're black, we're both still human. If I'm gay and you're straight, we're both still human. If I'm a Christian and you're a Buddhist, we're still human. There's no need to argue about those things or fight or make threats about those things. How does your gender identity determine shit about mine?
Right.
So how do your hobbies determine what I do with my time? They don't.
Right.
They don't have to.
They don't have to. No.
It's this buying into the idea that any identity other than ours is wrong. And unfortunately, because of that, there have been moments of extreme violence where people have felt like there's no other way for them to get common human decency. But these groups now, that are often the groups are neo-Nazis and things that I like to refer to, because they are our image of,
of terror.
Doing harm and terror. And their identity, no one is threatening to take away their whiteness or kill them for being white or male. Well, okay, there are. There are. I saw in a group the other day, like, a kill all men.
Oof.
And I was like, And then there was a big argument in the comments, because then there was another, it was like a kill all men who abuse their power.
But, like, men might abuse their power inadvertently because that was just how they were raised.
Right. They might not know. Do they actually deserve to die if they've abused their power, or do they deserve the chance to heal? Like,
Yeah, to learn about it and have the opportunity to figure that out.
and it's so messy.
It is.
It's so messy because, I've experienced more than like half a dozen or more men in power who have abused that power directly upon my physical being and my emotional being. But I don't think any of them deserve to die.
Right. It would be like if either of us looked back at all of the mistakes we made in our life where we've hurt people's feelings or said the quote-unquote wrong thing or maybe abused our power in one way or another inadvertently. Do we deserve to die?
Right. I fully own to the fact that I've done shit that if people, knew those things out of context, could automatically assume I'm a terrible person.
Right.
Because we've all done those things. We've all done things that have done harm upon someone else.
Yeah.
But it's an intentional choice. And we can take pride in the growth, in the healing, in the learning, in the, expanding into a new way of being. And we can offer forgiveness in that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so much conversation to be had here, but as is the core of our message, we want people to be able to be authentic and normalize that authenticity within themselves and be able to take pride in whatever you want to take pride in, as long as you're not taking pride in being quote unquote superior to someone.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't consider yourself superior. And when you start to have feelings about another group of people having pride in what they're doing or in their identity, if you start to have feelings of like discomfort or upset, is it because they are actively seeking out ways to harm people, or is it just because they are a demographic that you just don't necessarily agree with their message
or don't identify
with? Because we all have inherent biases that will cause us to have the gut reactions towards different things. Thank you, society, for for causing us to have those. But just gaining more awareness around that stuff is crucial.
Absolutely.
Stopping and asking ourselves, why am I having this gut reaction, is crucial in helping us better understand ourselves, our own identities, as well as other identities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And love yourself. Healthy love.
Oh man, yeah, loving yourself is a hard thing.
If it's actual love, there is no such thing as too much of it, though.
Indeed.
There's never too much love.
Yep. Think about that, love yourself, and cry about it, because Lord knows I have, with that Maddie Psalm song, be like, it's all about loving herself now as an authentic person, and I'm like, sucks forever.
Oh, heck.
Oh, heck.
Heck dang.